Hello, and welcome to the Music and Colors Scoring Animated Series panel, presented as part of Film Music House Summer Edition in association with Perspective Forum. My name is Andrew Krop, and I'll be moderating today. This panel is all about scoring for animated series, the unique challenges composers face as opposed to scoring for live action series, the differences between scoring for different animated genres, as well as advice on how to break into scoring for animation. It is my absolute privilege today to introduce our panel of amazing composers. They're comprised of award-winning talent who work in comedic animation, action animation, and animation for mature audiences. Please welcome. Can come on. Yeah, there we are. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hi.
I'm going to go ahead and have each of you tell us a little bit about yourselves and introduce you. Let us know some of the shows that you've worked on that we might know you from, and then we'll get started with our panel discussion. First up, I'd like to introduce a composer who just won an Annie Award this year for his work on the final season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars on Disney+. Please welcome Kevin Keiner.
Hey. Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Keiner, and I've been writing Star Wars music since 2007 or something. I did over 100 Clone Wars, and then a bunch of Star Wars Rebels. I'm currently scoring Star Wars: The Bad Batch, the new series. Other animated series I did a long time ago. I did Harold and the Purple Crayon. I did Stuart Little, and I just have a new one coming out called Trece, which is based on Filipino mythology.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce a duo of Emmy Award-winning composers who originally composed music for the original 1990s Animaniacs and recently returned after a 22-year hiatus to score the new Hulu reboot of the series. Please welcome Julian Steven Bernstein.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Buddy.
Julie, do you want to start or should I? We have different,
Go ahead.
similar but different backgrounds. Well, we both worked in different capacities on the original show, sometimes together, sometimes in parallel. We also worked on Pinky and the Brain and Freakazoid and Hysteria. Julie and I did Baby Looney Tunes. Let's see. We also worked on non-animations. Make Way for Naughty, which is a huge property in Britain. It's actually this is an American-made series, but everybody knows Naughty in the UK. Then we've also done non-animation stuff. Julie's done string quartet arrangements for award-winning vocalists. I've done a horror movie. I mean, who can forget Blood Lake: Attack of the Killer Lampreys? So we have a varied background. You know, we're both orchestral composers. We went to school and postponed real life as long as we could, and then here we are.
Still postponing.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's an aspect to that continues, but and so
now we're working on the reboot of Animaniacs, which includes Pinky and the Brain and some other stories. And we feel very fortunate to be doing so with a live orchestra, but it happens to be remote at the moment.
It's remotely live.
Great. We are so happy to have both of you here with us today. Thank you. And last but certainly not least is a BMI award-winning composer who crafted a very unexpected but brilliant synth-driven score for Netflix's new DOTA Dragon's Blood based on the massively popular online video game. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Dino Meneghin.
Hey, Dino.
Hi.
Go, Dino.
My name is Dino Meneghin, and I am currently working on DOTA Dragon's Blood. I started working in media scoring about 10 years ago on a show called Teen Wolf on MTV. Before that, I was working as a guitar player, playing with folks that you might know and also might not know. I'm also very happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dino, and thank you all once again for joining me here today. I've been so excited to moderate this panel with you all. I'm a huge animation fan, and a big part of successful animated series to me, and I'm sure everyone subconsciously, is having the right music to go along with it. So I want to get us started. I have a few questions that will open up to the whole panel. So feel free to chime in with your thoughts and expertise. Our first question of the day is, what is it that drew you to scoring for animation? And what also has been your favorite part about working in animation? And Kevin, why don't you kick us off with that one?
Um, I'm not sure I was drawn to it. I got a gig and I did it. And I didn't, once I had the gig, it was pretty fun. And I think early on, the first thing I did was maybe Johnny Quest, the reboot of Johnny Quest or something, when there was a team of about 6 of us. As I continued to write for animation, like when I was doing Harold and the Purple Crayon and Stuart Little, those are much more along the lines, I think, of Animaniacs or something like that Steve and Julie are doing, where it's pretty involved, it's pretty hitty, and it's pretty sophisticated, And I've always said, when I been nominated for an award, part of my speech was always like, if you are nominated in this category, say in the Annies or the daytime Emmys, in animation, as a composer, you've already won. You're an amazing composer if you're a successful animation composer, because it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah,
We're all nodding.
Yeah. It's amazing because I don't think everybody watching realizes how difficult it is to have music.
Hopefully they don't think it's difficult, because then we're not doing it right.
I mean, it's fun. Anybody I've ever talked to, they always say, "Oh, how fun." And yes, it is fun, but it's not just fun. It's hard, and it's harder than anything else. It's just
the synchronization demands are incredible with anime, especially what we do is like eye blinks and footsteps and door slams and stuff. That's all caught. And we used to call it Mickey Mousing, but we're on the other side of the freeway, so we call it Pinky Braining. It's the stuff that we're writing is orchestral and tradition, so we have that extra layer that we need to deal with. So yeah, it's not an easy gig, but like Kevin said, it's a gig, and that's what drew me to it, because I was on my way to I was hoping to write the next big a period drama or something, but we get to do that in 8-bar segments every half hour. So.
Well, you get 8 bars, it's usually 2 bars.
We're lucky to get 8 bars. Yeah.
it just start you, but it really is. You have to play the emotion, you have to play the drama, you have to try, if it's funny, if the cartoon is funny, hopefully, you have to try not to step on the funny, which is you gotta be able to see what the funny is, understand how it was put together, and then make sure that the music doesn't ruin that and enhances it. So
yeah, because I mean, timing, that's the old joke. Ask me, what's the most important aspect of timing? Yeah, there you go. So timing's a big deal.
And Dina, what was it that drew you to scoring for animation, and what's been your favorite part about working in it?
I think what drew me to it was probably my agent. But no, I mean, what actually drew me to it, it was the call that I had never worked in animation. But, I think that, I think there's an important distinction. Like there's writing for animation like Julie and Steven do, which is a whole nother discipline than like what I'm doing on DOTA Dragon's Blood. Like I'm basically writing the same way I would for a live action thing. What they do is so technical, and so there are so many technical demands. Like you can't, Kevin and I were actually talking with Chandler about this the last time we talked, that like, I think it's the most demanding kind of writing for film you can do, because you have all these technical considerations and you have to make it sound like music.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, I think that there's kind of a demarcation where there's like kind of the tradition of like Carl Stalling and that kind of like really writing for animation. And then there's stuff that comes more out of the anime tradition, which is similar to writing for live action. The additional considerations for me that come into writing for animation is that I think sometimes I have to bring out emotions a little more than you would if you had really good actors, because it's just really hard to sometimes animate those subtleties. So you have to kind of, you have to sort of pick and choose where you're going to bring those things up. But that's a really, I think that's what kind of makes this an interesting panel, is because like, I think that like what Kevin's doing and what I'm doing, I think what Kevin's doing on Star Wars is probably closer to what I'm, doing, in that he's not like, I don't think anyone's asking him to hit every single,
Yeah,
thing.
that's true. Yeah, I'm usually not. Again, though, I have the John Williams thing.
Well,
where,
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, where that's a little difficult. Although, in the last few years, we've sort of evolved away from that quite a bit in the show.
I think that also, and Animaniacs has evolved a bit, and it's not quite as hitting everything. It all depends on the writing and the producing and the directing. And, there's been an evolution of certainly over the past 20 years,
I think we're
more
kind of,
filmic type of writing.
the approach, especially in Pinky and the Brain, is a lot more cinematic than it was 22 years ago. So, it's a luxury to be able to write a line like you guys do. I'm very envious of that aspect, because we get something going, we have a theme we really like, and then we have to stop because somebody gets hit over the head. So it's a whole different thing, but there are elements that are the same. And like I said, you guys have this wonderful luxury of really digging in, and I think that's amazing.
And through lines. Although we've been lucky to be asked to write something, like we'll get notes back on what we've done, and then they'll say, we want to carry this through. Forget about that, what's happening there. We want that emotion to carry through. And so it just sort of builds and builds and builds and builds. And that's
a cool note to get.
What's that? Yeah, it's a cool note, absolutely.
Yeah.
We had to make that adjustment because in the initial iteration of the show, it was a different mindset. And our folks that we work for now are much more story-oriented or direction-oriented. So we have to kind of find that adaptation that we can actually give them what they want. And we're learning. It's in the second season now, and I think we're getting it. But
well, I would also like to give you guys props in terms of, it's one thing to listen to a Carl Stalling. If you listen to Carl Stalling and then you listen to a cue that you two are doing, there's a world of difference. You are in the zeitgeist of now, and the orchestral sound and the way you're composing. It's the difference between like what Bernard Herrmann was doing and what I'm doing, or something like that. You brought it forward. It's modern. It doesn't sound and I think another aspect of why it's so hard is because anybody can write like a little flourish, like or when somebody falls down, right? That's easy. But integrating it so that it's a cohesive piece of music and it's not stupid, because it's really easy just to hit things and not be musical. But what you do is you make it one piece of music, and that's
the hope. That is the hope.
It was originally, the Carl Stalling stuff, and then with the previous version, Richard Stone put a definite stamp on the style. He kind of adapted that, and then I think we took that and took it in our direction, whatever that is. So yeah,
Yeah,
it is
and
removed
Richard
from
was
Carl
the
Stahl.
original Animaniacs composer, yes.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
you worked with.
Oh, and even Bruce Broughton, what he did
Tiny to
in Tiny Toons. Yeah, I mean, he took it forward as well, you know, and
Exactly.
he's a master.
yeah.
So what are some of the unique challenges that a composer faces when working in an animated score? Like what would you say to someone who thinks that all you do is just write easy music for kids and silly cartoons?
Well, that must be directed to us because these guys aren't writing silly cartoons.
You know what? The first thing I would say is that the writing of the humor is aimed at adults.
Yeah.
It's not the cartoons even that we work on are aimed at adults, but they're written so that children can also enjoy, but it's going over their head. It's definitely going over a child's head.
It's multi-leveled, yeah.
It's aimed at adults, so it's not quite, but I have so many times told somebody who doesn't realize that what I'm doing, and they say, oh, like fun, that's really fun, like I said before. And I say, well, yeah, it's fun. I love it. I enjoy it. It's what I'm so happy I'm doing it. But fun is not the right word. It's challenging.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to write for all the reasons we've been saying, is to make, it's writing a piece of music. It still has to be a piece of music, but it's got to illustrate what's
It's
going
like a
on
crossword
the screen.
puzzle a little bit.
And what's going on the screen is constantly changing.
Yeah.
Well, and going back to what Steven said about, like, you know, I don't think that Kevin or Dino would think that people write music for silly cartoons. I think, like, people I've talked to about animation, like a lot of people, it doesn't matter if you're writing for Clone Wars or for DOTA Dragon's Blood, which is one of the goriest things I've ever seen. I think people just have this notion that animation is just for kids. It doesn't matter who the audience is. So
although that seems to have changed a lot. I mean, it's changed a lot over the years because there's so many animated film. But I think that still writing the TV animation hasn't quite come out of its hole where people think of it.
You know, what I'm finding with you know, in some of these interviews I've been doing, I mean, I'm being interviewed by people who are like half my age, and they didn't go in 1970. They weren't alive in 1977 when Star Wars came out, and a lot of them grew up with my music, as that's what they know as Star Wars music. And you know, I initially used very little and still use very little of John Williams' themes. And I mean, they kind of just consider that Star Wars. And also, you know, once Mandalorian came out, then people, it was such a hit and it was so well done that people were hungry for more Star Wars content. So they went and watched Clone Wars, and these are adults, you know, who they just wanted more Star Wars. And I think that, I mean, I think more of Clone Wars more views happened after Mandalorian than the entire time that I've been scoring it, you know, the last 10 years before that.
Yeah.
I think that there's very much a generational aspect to it, where kids who are like in their early 20s now, you know, like really hip, like, you know, like Flying Lotus and that whole crew out of Los Angeles, you'll always see like references to a lot of like to Naruto or these, you know, Japanese cartoons that this anime that they grew up on. So I think that for kids who are for young adults now, you know, I think the term animation has a completely different
different than
connotation
when we were growing up.
Yeah.
I before we open up the Q&A portion to all of our lovely participants today, I wanted to get this question in. What is the best advice that you can give a composer who's looking into composing for animation? And Dino, why don't you start us off with this one?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily give any advice specific to animation. I would say that if you if you really have a passion for animation, then I would just say, just like you would with film in general, I think just trying to make yourself a student of film. You know, I think of myself as I'm a translator. Like when I work with somebody, sometimes they'll start telling me, you know, well, maybe, and they'll start describing it in musical terms. And a lot of times I'll kind of politely stop them and say, don't tell me what you want to hear, tell me what you want to feel.
Yeah.
Because then I only have to translate it one way. You know, if somebody says to me like, it needs to be faster. Do they mean faster? Do they mean subdivided? Do they mean more percussion? So it's a lot easier for me. So I see my job as basically being able to translate what they have in their head, the emotion, into music. And in order for me to do that, I need to be able to think like a writer or think like a director. So for me, you know, a big part of it never ends. A big part of my continuing education is not just music, but thinking about color, thinking about images, thinking about framing, and thinking about writing and structure.
Yeah, that's huge.
Very well put.
I think my advice is very similar to Dino's in a way that, you know, if you want to write for film, you know, then do that. And you know, become a student of it. By the way, you're crazy if that's what you want to do. we all are. And I mean, I was, you know, when Star Wars and Superman came out, that's when I, you know, knew what I wanted to do, because I wanted to sound like that. I'm like, what is that guy doing? How does he sound that way? And I went out and I bought all of the scores that I could buy. At first, there weren't that many. And then I bought, you know, I bought who he studied, you know, which is Korngold, Stravinsky, those kind of things. And I'm talking about John Williams. So, I mean, I had a focus that I loved that sound and I wanted to do that. And I didn't really chase. I mean, how can you chase a Star Wars gig, right? I mean, but it happened, and that's the thing, is luck is where preparation meets opportunity, you know. So if you're focused on animation, you want to write for animation, then study it, become a student of it, find your own sound, and then, you know, then the rest is luck and opportunity and preparation.
I mean, in terms of breaking in, I mean, I think we can all say that luck has a huge part to play, but
Like 99%.
Yeah. And Julie and I both kind of had, I wouldn't say, well, maybe apprenticeships in a way, writing with just slightly older, slightly more experienced composers. I mean, I kind of was taken under Fred Steiner's wing when he was working on Tiny Toons. And that's the only reason I think I kind of hooked into animation, because then I started ghostwriting and orchestrating for him and then other folks. And it kind of went from there. But, you know, it's a lot of luck, but you take advantage of the opportunities. You have to prepare. You make sure you're able to do the gig.
I would say,
Get lucky.
say yes to anything that comes up, anything that has to do with writing, or even not just writing music, you know, arranging, orchestrating, writing, I don't know, whatever else comes up, because the more experience you get, the more you learn. And then also listening and watching everything, and like
studying film is huge, because it's telling stories, and we're doing our job to assist in that goal, to tell whatever story and to convey whatever emotions required. So be a student of that. Absolutely, Dino, you said it right on the nose.
I'd like to just jump in and say one more thing. I feel like there's a lot of young people that I'll talk to, or you know, that will kind of, sometimes I feel like a lot of the interest that's happening right now in film scoring, whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, there just wasn't that kind of interest, is that I feel like it's one of the only places in the music industry anymore where people can make like a good living. And I feel like there's a lot of young people and young composers, or even people who aren't composers, who kind of have this idea like, well, I'll go into film scoring. And you know, the thing is, it's like, it's really, really hard. and not to say that like, you have to be a genius to do this. I mean, I'm doing it, but it's just that there is so much, there is so much competition. People come from all over the world, and most of them will work for nothing, when they start. And it's like, it really has to be something, it has to be something you want to do, because there is so much rejection. I once heard that Alan Silvestri said it at one of the Sundance Labs, asked the class, he said, okay, you guys have the chops to do this. Do you have the stomach for it?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's such a huge part of it. And for me, so it's just like, when I meet young composers who kind of feel like, hey, this looks like a good gig. They see, Harry Gregson Williams or Hans's huge studio, and they're like, I want to do that. It's like, well, I mean, that is definitely something to aspire to, but like, you don't get to that point unless you can take a lot of gut punches along the way.
Yeah, I usually tell people that you have to be so passionate about doing this thing that you're willing to go through all the rejection, because there will be rejection. And if it's just something that you have to do, then you keep working on it. You do other things along the way, and hopefully eventually you get there. But I agree, it's hard. And we're some of the lucky few handfuls that.
And I think it should be brought up. I mean, I just did an audition for an animated project like yesterday. There's like 5 other composers, and they're listening to everybody. I don't know who they are. And I've been doing this for 37 years. And I have a lot of awards, and I have a lot of success and a lot of fans and whatever, and all of us. And we all have to still audition. We have to send in reels that never get answered, that we never hear what the heck. We don't even know if anybody listened to them. We spent all day putting together the doggone reel. I mean, time after time after time after time. Yeah, you have to have a stomach for that. I mean,
it's so humbling. It's the most it's such a humbling
job. It really is. And the fact is, there are a lot of really, really good composers out there, and we're so lucky to be doing what we're doing for a living. And there are a lot of people out there that could be doing it as well, that haven't yet had the chance. So,
I mean, in terms of advice, I mean, one other thing popped into my head is that I think it's necessary to have decent people skills. Because not only do producers, directors want to hire people who can do the work, but there are a lot of us that can do the work, but they want to hire people that they like, or that they can get along with, or feel some sort of connection. And networking, that's the other thing. I mean, meet as many people as you can. You can meet your peers, but we're all going for the same jobs. So there's a limited, it's a club that we can kind of commiserate with each other. But in terms of networking, I think it's networking with people that are doing the hiring and making those decisions. So there's
I think the people skills, that's a huge point. A long time ago, I was privileged to be in the room next to a composer named Joey Carbone, and he was pitching a theme to Gary Shandling, which ultimately they did for the Gary Shandling show. And I listened to Joey talking, and before he even played any music, I'm like, oh, he's gonna love this. And I wouldn't really call it salesmanship. I would call it people skills. And I mean, but they're gonna like your music a lot better if they like you. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like a fact of life, kind of in any job almost.
Yeah.
Unless you're submitting blind demos and they're picking one that they like that guitar riff or whatever it is. We're up against that too. So but I do think, still it's a valuable skill to possess or to develop, and it never stops developing. And hopefully, especially I was terribly introverted growing up, and I've learned to not do that when I'm in meetings, because it works better when you're communicative. So.
Excellent advice, everyone. I had so many questions I wanted to ask you, but thankfully your answers were so wonderful. You pretty much covered everything I was going to say. So we're going to go ahead and open up the panel Q&A. We already have some questions coming in. Our first one comes from an anonymous attendee. How mysterious. What is the best way for a composer like myself, not me, anonymous, to approach someone to become an assistant or an intern with you or another composer?
Ask.
Email, whatever, get a hold of us, and yeah, pester
find somebody
somebody, block you.
Yeah, find somebody busy who you can demonstrate your ability to help them. You know, we all get lots of solicitations, I'm sure, from very able folks. Julie and I don't have much need for assistance in terms of writing right now, but you know, so you know, find somebody who needs you, right?
I just went through a process of hiring a new assistant, and the quality of the applicants that came in were really, I mean, tremendous. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say is, I think that when you're approaching somebody, like I'm sure everybody here, you know, sometimes I'll get solicitations through my website or through, you know, a friend of a friend. It's, you know, a new composer who wants to get a job working, and they'll always say, hey, I'm coming to LA. Could I get a cup of coffee with you? Mm-hmm. And first of all, I drink way too much coffee already, you know, so I don't need any more coffee. But, you know, for me, it's like, I think that an important part of when you're applying for a job or when you want to work with somebody, try to put yourself in their place and think about what kind of value you could bring to them. Because there's always a need for people who are competent, timely, detail-oriented. You know, I don't know about everybody else here, but like, I know what my strengths are. I'm not a real details guy. When all the details are left to me, it's kind of a, you know, it's not great. So it's like, when I look to hire people, I look for people who are much more detail oriented than I am, because you're becoming part of a team. So I think that, you know, sometimes young composers are so eager, and it's really nerve wracking when you need the gig. It's like, you just want the gig, and, you know, like, we've all been there. But I think it's important to think about, like, instead of thinking about sort of like breaking in, think about, okay, what can I do? And, you know, could another composer use that at their studio?
Yeah, sure.
You know, and it might even be that you're like a great cellist, you know, and it's like, if if somebody hires an assistant who's a great cellist, you know, that's a selling point. You know, you have an in-house person to do cello solo stuff. So it's just,
I mean, for me, you also have to be really good with tech. Yeah, don't you think? You know, I mean, you have to know the DAWs, the DAW, you know, whether it's Performer or Logic or Cubase. And, you know, that's really important.
Yeah, no question. The technical stuff is the area that I think that we would be hiring when we hire. We actually have a kind of tech assistant that works for us for each session, because it takes away so much time to prepare these files that we have this very brilliant young woman do that for us. And it gives us an extra couple days, which is huge.
I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who could use an assistant. So just go out and find people and email, call. I don't think working composers mind at all getting people asking them. And we'd all like to help other composers find their way.
It's a good point you made, Dino, about the coffee. I mean, it's really hard to rationalize taking a lunch, which would usually probably turn into 2-hour lunch with someone if your discussion is good, that, well, I got to get back to you. There's always something in your brain saying, get back to work, get back to work. And it's not a comfortable feeling. So, you know, present yourself in a way that is succinct, like everybody has agreed that can help in a place that you need to help.
And also, I think stay in touch, and there's a fine line of staying in touch in an annoying way. Like, I don't want emails every day, but especially if you get a positive, like, hey, you know, I'm not looking for anybody now. Like, I'm not, but I know I will be, you know, within a year or two, hopefully, if I'm still working. And, you know, so just like stay in touch every few months, say, hey, remember me, I'm this guy, I was whoever, and, you know, just how you doing, do you need anything or whatever.
Right.
Let's move on to our next question. Rodrigo asks, is it possible to work on an animated series or film being outside of LA, or is it necessary to be in the city?
Now it is, I think. Everything's done virtually for this last year, and we've all proven that it can be done. I mean, we could easily live across the planet and still do this. The only thing is meetings, but we haven't been taking meetings in person for a year and a half. So, you know, I would say, yeah, definitely anywhere you are, you can do it.
It will probably depend on the particular project. If they want you to come in and actually be there, but you can do that too, because you can take the train, fly in for the meeting and then leave, depending on the project. But I don't think you absolutely need to live in LA.
Yeah, and there's a lot of product being produced outside of LA and New York. So there's, you know, this isn't the only place to break in, as you were, to get the experience. You know, there are a lot of other very, very active markets to participate in.
Yeah, I don't think any of us knows how things are going to keep working moving forward, right? It's sort of a new frontier, and it probably opens things up to people who don't live in town more, really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know about, see, I want that to be true. Because sometimes I look at real estate in other places,
Yeah.
and I want my studio to be a barn somewhere.
Yeah.
But you know, it's funny. I was having this conversation with another friend of mine, a writer that I work with a lot, and we were talking about a mutual friend of ours who was moving to Dallas, and he's busy. He's doing a bunch of stuff, and you know, her take on it was, I don't know that, like, if this town, when LA comes sort of back to normal, there's still going to be people that want to go out for drinks or meetings or coffee. There's still going to be that personal element to it. I think it's going to be, my feeling is that it's going to be different than before. Like, I hope, like Kevin, that we don't go back to in-person spotting sessions, because it's the most inefficient part of the workflow.
Yeah.
You know, like when somebody's like, yeah, could you come out at like 4 o'clock on a Friday and drive from Burbank to Santa Monica to do a spotting session?
Yeah.
But I think that there may still be an element for people who are breaking in to do in-person stuff. That said, you know, the assistant that I just hired, I mean, I knew him from working at another guy's studio, but we'll probably never see each other in person. Like, everything we're doing is all, you know, online. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be a new world.
I will share just a quick story. I talked to Mark Snow, and he moved back east. You know, and he was, I mean, Mark Snow did all of X-Files for you guys have done, and a lot of other stuff, and, you know, great composer. And he had a tough time, and I think he wouldn't have told people he moved back east if he had to do it again, because, and maybe that's particular to him, but everybody thought he'd retired. Which wasn't the case at all. He just wanted to go back to family and stuff back there. So, I mean, if I had to give odds on somebody, if there was like one guy who was in LA and one guy who was in, say, Dallas or wherever, you know, Florida, Tampa or something, I would put my money on the guy who's in LA. I think there's going to be better chances.
I think there might be residual bias in that regard, because in reality there really isn't a difference. If they have the same kind of chops, it shouldn't make a difference. But I think that there is this residual feeling about that. So I'm going to contradict my previous response. You're probably right.
Answer: we don't know.
Yeah, we know.
Maybe.
It's okay to not know, especially after last year.
Yeah.
Next up, we have a question from Sonia. Do you see the demand for animated film scores increasing significantly with the rise of streaming platforms? And how do you take advantage of an increasing demand?
Taking advantage of increasing demand isn't, I don't think it's up to us because it just will absorb the additional talent pool of composers. And we're all still competing. You know, it's a vastly larger talent pool than there is product, and there's a vast amount of product. So yeah, I don't know that we have much effect on that, but certainly there's a lot more product to vie for. I mean,
Yeah, I see a huge increase in animation. My brother is a CGI artist, and he sees a lot more stuff ramping up too. And I think just anecdotally on my part, I see more animated products getting off the ground these days.
yeah.
I think that a lot of people, I think that in, because sets, had to shut down last year, I think a lot more people started looking towards making their projects animated that before would have been live action. And I think the fact that there was an appetite for it and that people were watching it, kind of a light went off, and, people said like, hey, we can tell these same stories for, less money and not have to, have sets and do all that. I mean, it's not like it's easy to do animation, but there are some advantages, to telling complex stories in a way that would be very difficult to do with live action. So like I'm supposed to be doing the set, like I'd never considered doing animation, and I'm doing like another one next year. So like I feel like I've just seen kind of anecdotally just a lot more things. I feel like America, because of Netflix, Americans are kind of catching up with, what people who've been on, Japanese animation have known for a long time.
Well, if you just looking over the past 10 years, there's tons more animation, like on primetime animation. It's just become more popular to have something animated than 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, our show's on Hulu now, and there wasn't Hulu 20 years ago. So yeah, certainly there are more platforms, there's going to be more product and more demand. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of how like when, like in the, I don't know, like early 2000s, when you had like, like when TV used to be kind of TV, it was like movies were prestige. TV was kind of like what you did until you got to movies. And then in like the early 2000s, then it was all of a sudden TV actors, TV directors, film actors, film directors, film composers started working in TV, and then TV was this prestige thing. And now I kind of feel like you're seeing the same transformation with animation, where it's like, yeah.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot, how, or I have been talking recently about that, Steve can attest to that, about how there was a time when working on TV was really, really looked down. That was the lowest thing that you could do. You wanted to work in film, whether you were an actor or a composer. And then TV became, oh, look, there's series. It's really, so hopefully animation is going in that direction.
Yeah, I think because of all the serious stories and what we used to call the black paper animation, the Batman and Superman that they used to do on dark backgrounds, that has, I think, educated a lot of people growing up to the fact that it's not just silly bumps on the head. There are stories to be heard and watched, and and like Dino said, that you can do stuff in animation that would be either impossible or impossibly expensive to reproduce in a live action way. So where did I start with that? I have no idea.
I'm not sure. Thank you for all of your insights on that. Our next question comes from Ivan, who asks, how many minutes of music a day are required to deliver in animation?
It's a good question.
That's something too that I find myself always telling people, because I'll say, I wrote so much today. I wrote 2 minutes, and they look at me like that's crazy. 2 minutes is a lot of music to write in a day, depending on how many notes you're writing. But it's in our case, with the shows that we're working on, we have about 24 minutes of music to write for an episode. And between the two of us, we need to get done, I think, 4 minutes a day or something like that.
Well, I'm hoping it's not that much because we're behind. If
3.5 minutes.
We're given basically 2 weeks between sessions, and I think that it's less than that because of all the spotting sessions and that happened at 5 o'clock. Luckily, they're virtual right now, but yeah. So I mean, it is quite a good amount of music per day. I mean, 2 minutes will probably get the job done because it's 12 days, a little less than 2 weeks. Yeah, probably. How about you guys?
I find that like the show that I'm working on now is like about 24 minutes of music, and it's about 2 weeks. You know, 2, sometimes 3. It's a little bit of an odd schedule. So because sometimes they might push something because they need more time to work on the animation. But yeah, it's about 2 weeks. So yeah, I mean, for me, my goal, I know that I personally can write 2 minutes of good music a day. I can write 8 minutes of crap, but you know, I can write 2 minutes of good music. But it usually, the way I work is I'll kind of sketch first, then I'll kind of go back and flesh out the ideas, and sometimes I might help with just extra hands getting some of that stuff onto disc, as it were, instead of paper. But you know, for me, it's like, so sometimes it's hard for me to quantify. I kind of usually have to go back at the end of it and go, how much did I actually get done per day? Because I don't like do 2 minutes start to finish, you know, each day. It's sort of like I'll have different periods where first I'll sketch, then I'll go through and sort of do more of the arranging, and then, you know, then there's kind of a finishing process. But to me, what I've kind of come to over the years is about, you know, 2 minutes. And then if I need to do significantly more than that, then that's when I start looking at, you know, hiring other people, so that I'm not just killing myself to write crappy music. Because at the end of the day, I'm much better off having other people working with me, you know, to help me get the music done, rather than, you know, and doing better music than I am, you know, doing everything myself and having it, you know, just not be as good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think what also, you know, we each kind of have different ways that we get our product on. You know, I use like full orchestras quite often out of the country. And there are days that are involved in preparing that. You know, you have a score for a 70-piece orchestra. I have to, you know, usually I do the mock-up pretty much. I mean, I'm doing my own orchestration, and then it goes to an orchestrator, and he'll fill in things like maybe contrabassoons and tubas and things that I didn't care to put on the mock-up. And then, you know, I have to look at his orchestration and change the dynamics. Say, you know, he put mezzo piano, I want mezzo forte, or if there's a slur in an area or something like that. So I go mark up his stuff, and then my assistant takes pictures of that, and then he sends it to the copyist. So we're doing Prague and Budapest these days, and you know, we do a lot of other places. So that, you know, that adds days to the, you know, even though you have a 2-week schedule, and I know Steve and Julie, you guys have 20 individual people right now because of COVID that all have to record their part. Then that has to be assembled. We were saying each track and then mixed together. You know, that's a couple of days extra work where you can't write, where you're doing, you know, you're doing patching things together, you're working on the orchestration, working on the mix. So and then I think with Dino, possibly, I'm not sure if you use that thing in back of you, but that takes a long time to come up with a patch, you know, because you're physically patching, you know, one oscillator into a modulator, whatever you're doing, and coming up with that sound. Probably you have to record it because it won't make that same sound in the morning. right?
Right. I always kind of, that's to me, usually this is part of the pre-production process. When I have the luxury of having a script or some time, I will basically make samples and drum loops and things. And because this is not something that generally translates too well to, you know, I need to get 3 minutes written today and this is a part of it. You know, that's just not what it does well.
So you'll take snippets of what you've done, like you'll find a patch or a lick or something like that, and then record it and then have that as part of like a toolkit or something?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I actually, I will sort of basically do like an improvisation. And I'll just spend like a couple of hours working with this and patching and with different synths, also with my, you know, other hardware synths. And I'll basically I'll just keep record on the whole time. And I'll just end up with, you know, whatever, you know, 30, 40 minutes of stuff. And then what I like to do is I'll kind of quickly go through it myself. But then there's a guy that I've worked with for many years, and I'll have him actually go through and cut it up into snippets. And I like that because I get another set of ears on it, and he'll catch things that I didn't even remember. And so then I end up with a set of tools back that it's like, I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even remember doing this. This is neat. And sometimes those things end up being, you know, a motif that I can use, you know, throughout a season. And it's, to me, it's like, this is kind of my, you know, using, you know, especially with modular stuff, but, you know, kind of capturing, I'll do looping with my guitar. Just catching those little bits of happy accidents are how I kind of, you know, it's almost like having another musician here with me.
Man, that's a marvelous insight. You know, thanks for sharing that with us, because I think, you know, we all have different processes of working, and I've actually never worked like that. I think I'm going to rip off your idea, man.
Please do. Please do. See, this is the best part, huh? Oh, sorry.
I get to have somebody else because Steve and I work in you can see we're in different spaces. And so we're both at our individual setup, but it really does help to play the cue that I've just written for him, because then he'll say, well, what about you didn't, you know, we get it, we can critique each other. It really does help to have somebody else's.
Or I can easily steal from you, which is helpful.
That works too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting having somebody in the same play. It's like having a guy that helps, but we help each other that way.
There's also another time-consuming thing is the fact that in our case we have to mock up. I mean, we write into Sibelius, and we have to send our mock-up to our producer, who then hopefully likes it, but gives us notes, which we have to then work with. So that's an extra time thing that we didn't really have back in.
No,
because there
no,
was.
and I think everybody should know that's part of the gig. I mean,
yeah,
everybody gives a lot of notes these days. The days of Steven Spielberg sitting down with John Williams and John playing like a little melody on piano and then they go out to lunch are gone. You know,
yeah.
I mean, everything I do is mocked up super heavily, so it sounds super good. And then, you know, and that's for approvals. And the reason I make it sound as good as I can is so that it gets approved.
Yeah.
Fewer notes.
Yeah.
If you make it sound, the fewer notes you're going to get.
Yeah.
But of course,
they can't afford to try to use their imagination. A lot of them don't have the kind of imagination we hope they have. And there's a lot at stake. I think maybe a lot more at stake. There's all these corporate ears that are on our stuff too, and budgets and stuff that I don't think that we had to deal with as much.
Well, not just that. We didn't have in the 90s. There wasn't a way to mock up.
No.
There wasn't such thing as mocking up. So it's just, everything has changed now that it can be mocked up. Of course, they're going to want to mock up. They want to hear it beforehand if they can.
It's actually changed my writing, I think, to be able to do that, because now I can instantly hear if the color is going to work, if it's going to erase the dialogue basically, you know, and just, I'm more sure at the end of the cue that, yeah, this is going to be okay, barring any kind of notes saying, no, this is totally the wrong approach, which thankfully doesn't happen that often. But yeah, it's helpful in that way, but it does take, once you get good at it, it's okay, but it takes time and a lot more skill to be able to do that. I mean, luckily, I don't know, Kevin, what you use, but using Note Performer in Sibelius is an immense help to us because we're orchestrating ourselves as well. So we're going straight to score, and then it will just play back the dynamics and the colors. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
so
you know, I do it, you know, I write into Logic. And I'm always tweaking, you know, either volumes or expressions and stuff like that, making those swells happen. And then, you know, the orchestrator, my orchestrator, he looks at expression and things like that. So he knows when there's a crescendo, you know, so he just takes my MIDI files and I have to deal with the notation.
That's handy.
I think we have time for a couple more questions, so we'll try to fit in as many as possible. I think this one will be quick from Darren. Which DAW or DAWs do you use?
So Logic for me.
DP, Digital Performer.
Cubase.
Wow.
So that's what you need to learn, people.
Yeah, any assistance, take note. Yeah.
Know them all.
This question comes from Naveed. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And it's probably for a pre or post-pandemic world of composing. Do you always use real musicians in the recording process, or is everything done in the box?
Yes.
Well,
all of the above.
I'm going to say right now, Steve and I are very lucky because we have live musicians that we're working with, which is the same as the original Animaniacs. And so they're in keeping with that. We have the live musicians, but throughout the years, we have had many projects that were not actually
All in
live.
the box.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, many times the budget's not there and you have to do it all in the box. So, you know, if you want to be a film composer or television or animation composer, you better learn to make it sound really good out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think like the final episode of Clone Wars, I mean, the whole, and some of the cues that the fans liked the best were all electronic on purpose. You know, the graveyard and then Darth Vader finding Ahsoka's lightsaber and stuff was completely electronic sounds on purpose. And so there were, you know, I mean, there were other live players in that episode, but the last, you know, 10 minutes of the show or 8 minutes of the show was completely electronic.
Yeah.
I think it also changes, like on DOTA, the show that I'm working on right now, it's a lot of in the box stuff, and then I'll bring in soloists. And, you know, for me, I always think about like what's going to have the most impact. So it's like, you know, for me, for like a big cue, you know, to bring in, you know, a string section isn't going to make any difference because, you know, the samples are just going to sound a million times bigger. But if it's an intimate cue and, you know, I want to have that feel of like a soloist or a small string group or winds or something, that's where it's going to make the difference. So it's like, for me, it's like, for example, like if I'm trying to, most of the time, if I have something big I'm doing, if I bring in, you know, if I can't bring in a full group, I'll choose to bring in a percussionist to do, you know, overdubs, because that I find helps really add, you know, a live element, and, you know, it'll bring in things that I hadn't thought of doing. So I feel like there's kind of a hybrid approach. I mean, one of the things is like with DOTA, when, you know, we kind of established like we weren't going to have an orchestra, then that was another reason I tried to lean harder into more electronic stuff, because rather than sort of make it try to sound like a real orchestra, I was like, let's just lean harder into what this actually is. To make it, you know, more of its own thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. We're almost out of time. I just want to end with another quick question that I really liked. In one or two sentences, at what point in your career did you feel you were successful? And let's start with Stephen on this one.
Next year.
Oh man, you took mine.
Oh, sorry. We all kind of feel that way. I mean, after you finish a job, like, am I ever going to work again? I think we all have that kind of thing, or maybe don't, if you line something else ahead. I don't know, I guess, you know, winning or not getting nominated for something is a nice recognition. You think, oh, maybe, yeah, this is something that I can do and maybe hopefully keep doing. But, oh, shut up. It's success. I mean, that's a term that's very vague. I mean, I feel like I'm competent now. And for me, that's the level of success that I aspired to. So, yeah, it's a process. I don't think that there's a point where you say, oh, I'm successful now.
Yeah.
You know, we can pay for a house. So, you know, that's success in itself.
And Julie, how about you?
I'm thinking that maybe success is a more personal feeling. You know, you're constantly growing. That's not ever going to end. You know, it's not like there's this place and I've reached there and now I can relax. And it's always a challenge. It's a challenge to get better. So it's sort of a personal besting. And as far as success, obviously having a job that pays, being able to do this for money, I suppose I guess you're professional. You can call yourself a professional composer, but there's so many things involved in success that really we have no control over. And especially when it comes to doing an art form like this, some people are going to listen to what you do and love it, and the next person's not going to like it. And so how can you tell?
Or realize it's there.
Yeah, you can't, I don't know that you can judge your success by what comes from the outside. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say is that you have to feel some kind of successful continuation in your own brain.
Yeah, I think you have to be.
I love that.
You have to be proud of your work. You know, I might have had one moment. I listened to an old soundtrack of mine for a film I did, and felt like it was good writing. You know, and I think that was my best definition of success.
Nice feeling.
I think it's something that always changes. You know, I think your definition of what success is going to change over time. And I don't for me personally, I don't know if I'll ever feel, successful. Sometimes I feel like I did a good job, but I would say for me, it's more like small victories. You know, you kind of, you have a good relationship with somebody and they feel like you brought their project to life or that you were an important part of it. That's a small victory. After that wears off in about 20 minutes after it happens, and I'm back to sucking my thumb and curled up in the fetal position.
Exactly.
That's totally true. That's completely true.
That is exactly right. I'm so glad I'm not the only one.
Well, I want to say a very special thank you again to all of you for spending some time with me today. You had some wonderful insights, and I hope our participants today really got something out of it that they didn't know. So thank you again. And for everyone tuning in, be sure to check out Perspective Forum on Facebook for more panels and workshops from Film Music House. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to meet you guys.
It was
And
great.
nice to meet you.
It was really great.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot.